because I want everyone to be able to ask questions. We'll go through a lot of information here, and if anybody wants to drop questions in the chat or raise hands and ask any questions, I would love for this to be interactive and we can discuss any questions that you might have. So here we go. So today we're going to talk about metabolism and maintaining a healthy weight, which sounds like a simple thing, but has become very difficult in the world that we live in today. So a little bit about me. I'm Dr. Aleksandra Gajer. I am the physician owner of the Gajer Practice, where we help men and women achieve a healthy metabolism, balanced hormones, and try to help prevent chronic illness and help people to live in their optimal state. So I was an ER doctor for a long time. I worked in the emergency department for 10 years. I was conventionally trained as a medical doctor, and I worked in our system where, in the ER, we see a lot of people come in for accidents, for acute illnesses, broken bones, things like that. But actually, most of the people that we saw were people who were coming in with chronic illnesses. So longstanding diabetes, kidney problems, lung problems, longstanding illnesses that just got worse over time. We could sort of put a Band-Aid on things temporarily, but over time, for most people, things invariably got worse rather than better. And our medical system is set up in such a way that we have specialists for everything, so you can get the cardiologist, the endocrinologist, and we can put Band-Aids on things. But in the long run, most of the time, unfortunately, once some of these chronic illnesses take hold, people get worse and not better. So, in my current practice now, I focus a lot on metabolic health. So, we all kind of know the word metabolism, but not everybody is familiar with what metabolic health is. And metabolic health is really how our body uses energy. And we think a lot about metabolic health and metabolism as it relates to weight. People generally know once my weight goes up, I don't feel as good, but metabolic health sort of ties together a lot of other illnesses. So people who are metabolically unhealthy, many of them will eventually develop diabetes. Heart attacks and strokes are highly related to your metabolic health and your metabolism. Liver disease, kidney disease, cancer, Alzheimer's and dementia. The way your metabolism is running is a huge component in how sharp you'll be in your 7th and 8th decade of life. Fertility, sleep, chronic inflammation. So it's about weight, of course, but it's about so much more than weight. Investing in our metabolic health wherever we are now pays dividends in the later decades of life. Modern medicine has sort of bought us an extra 30 years. We're not dying in our 50s, 60s, but the quality of those years really depend on what we do to take care of our bodies before then. So as people's metabolism becomes less efficient, you may not become a diabetic for 10 years, but that is a precursor, and what you're doing right now will affect how you live, how you feel, what you're able to do in 10 years. So metabolism or metabolic health is what happens to food after you put it in your body. So food can either be used for energy or it can be stored as fat. And that's what metabolic health is basically about. It's about energy. It's about how we use fuel. So this is a map that many people have probably seen from the CDC, where we look at what has happened to our weight over time between 1987 and 2021, and the obesity rates of how many people were overweight or obese. And we know that many Americans have gained weight. And I think the unfortunate thing is that most people feel like it's a willpower thing, or it's just them, or other people can sort of maintain a healthy weight. But this is something that's happening to everybody, that there has to be an environmental change. Something has to have changed in our environment for this number of people to now be overweight, whereas before It was 0 to 10%, in some states less than 10%. Now in many places, more than 35% of people are overweight or obese. So we'll talk a little bit about what has changed. Why are so many of us struggling with weight now? Why isn't this so simple? And what can we do? There's something wrong with our environment, but we all have control over our personal environment, how we live our lives, what the choices we make during the day. And so I would like to empower you to make those choices that will make your future decades the most vibrant and vital that they can be, where you feel really good, you have a lot of energy, and you can do the things that make you happy in life. So as Americans started to become overweight, we didn't really understand what was going on. And there was a lot of bad guidance from the medical community. And most of it was around calories, and calories are very important, but they are not the whole story. So when someone went to their doctor because they've become overweight, they're struggling with their weight, generally you were told to move more and eat less. And you must be eating too much and not moving enough. So move more, eat less, you'll lose weight. And the food pyramid was born in 1992 as we were becoming more overweight. And many of you probably remember this, where we were told to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, cereal, rice, and pasta a day between the years of 1992 and 2005. We were told to eat some fruits and vegetables, avoid the meat, poultry, fish, milk, yogurt, less and less, and then the fats and oils were the absolute worst, right? And what happened when we did this? Everyone got worse, right? In those years, our obesity rates went way up. So the reason why the food pyramid was built like that was off this very simple metric, where if you look at carbs and protein and fats have 9 calories per gram, whereas protein and carbs have only 4. So logically, we were told fat is the enemy. Do not eat fat. You will get fat if you eat fat, and you should eat a lot of carbs because there's not many calories in those. And so with this kind of thinking in mind, which seemed logically sound, and thermodynamics applies there, we started to get a lot more processed foods in our stores, fat-free foods, fat-free dairy, TV dinners, lean cuisine, all these artificial foods with a lot of different chemicals that were low in fat and low in calories. And again, our health did not improve under those circumstances. So this was sort of the perfect storm that we lie in now. And in the recent decades, as we've studied metabolic health a little bit more, and why so many people have become overweight, there are multiple factors. And yes, calories are a factor. If you eat more calories than you burn, you will gain weight. That is a simple fact of life, but they are certainly not the only factor. So hormones are a very important factor in the way our body processes food, whether it uses calories for energy versus stores them as fat. Inflammation is a big factor, our gut health, and sleep and stress. So I want to talk a little bit more about each one and give you some pointers, some actionable steps to take so that you can start repairing your metabolism and working towards that weight that feels really good to you. So the question became, is a calorie a calorie? We got all these diet foods. They were low in calories, 90 calories, 100 calories. So is a calorie just a calorie? Whether you put a banana in your mouth or bread or an apple, does it all break down the same thing? And obviously, the answer is that it is not. While calories are important, the quality of your calories and what you eat, when you eat, how you eat it is very important as well. So that takes us into a discussion about hormones. And when we think about hormones, most people are most familiar with sex hormones. So those are testosterone in men, estrogen and progesterone in women. And although those are important, they are sort of the tip of the iceberg. There are many hormones in our bodies that also that are fundamental in our metabolic health and our overall well-being. So the most important is insulin, and we'll talk a little bit about how insulin works and how you can use insulin to your advantage. Cortisol is your stress hormone that's released by your adrenal glands that can affect your metabolic health as well as your weight. Thyroid is really important. We have seen a huge spike in thyroid disorders over the last 20, 30 years. And that again is due to some chemicals and other environmental factors that weren't around before. And then there's the sex hormones. So all these play an important role in your metabolism and your weight. So insulin. So this is, I promise this is the only slide like this that I'm going to have in this presentation that has a cell on it. We're going to try to keep this as simple as possible, but I think that understanding just a little bit about insulin will be helpful. So we need insulin to bring sugar or glucose into our cells. In order for any of our organs to work, our brains, our kidneys, our livers, you need glucose, which is sugar, blood sugar, you know. And most of your foods are broken down to glucose. And in order to get into cells, insulin has to open a channel for that glucose to get in. So basically, you eat something, your body spits out insulin, it opens the channel in a cell, and the sugar goes inside the cell. But what happens to a lot of us, because there is so much sugar in our diets now, the cell gets overwhelmed. And if there's too much sugar coming into the cells, it becomes toxic and it starts breaking down. So we develop something called insulin resistance. So basically, insulin tries to open that channel, but it's not working because the cell is resistant to it. So the body responds by producing more and more insulin to try to open that channel to push the sugar into cells. And insulin is a fat storage hormone. So the more circulating insulin you have in your body, the more you will store fat. So again, you eat something, your body has options. Am I going to use this as energy, or am I going to store these calories as fat? And if you have a big insulin spike, the calories will be stored as fat. So we want to keep insulin low. And our food environment has not been very conducive to keeping insulin low. You know, the food industry has really blossomed over the last 50 years or so. And we now have highly palatable foods that were not available to our ancestors who lived even 100 years ago. But our genes, the way our bodies are made, we've been around for hundreds and thousands of years eating fairly regular food. And now we've had scientists working on foods where, the Doritos motto is you can't have just one. And the truth is you can't have just one. They're actually hijacking certain centers in your brain where it's very hard to have just one. So there's always been sugar in our foods, but now the concentration of glucose, the concentration of sugars, the hidden sugars, the way, all our meals can be sweetened, the sugary cereals, all these things has caused the situation where so many Americans and people living in other industrialized countries are insulin resistant. So that means that our body has to put out a lot more insulin to bring sugar into cells. And now our body's giving signals to store fat all the time. So what can you do? The glycemic index basically tells you how much insulin will be released if you eat a certain food. So you want to try to eat low glycemic index foods. Those are foods that will not spike your blood sugar and will not cause that big insulin release, which will tell your metabolism to store fat. So probably the most important takeaway is you want to eat whole foods as much as possible. It's not always possible, but if you eat whole foods that come from nature, vegetables, some fruit, protein, lean proteins, beans, a lot of those foods have a low glycemic index. Some fruit will have a higher glycemic index, but when it comes to sugar, if it's paired with fiber, so fruit has fiber and sugar, it is highly protective. So if you're eating an apple, it's much different than eating a Starburst because it's paired with fiber. A lot of that sugar will actually go to feed your gut microbiome or the little bugs that live inside your gut that do good things to protect your body. So there's some, even though fruit is high in sugar, there's some protective factors from the fiber. But to prevent those insulin spikes and really try to heal your metabolism, you want to eat those lower glycemic index foods. And a lot of those foods will end up being whole foods. So that means single ingredients, things you can find in your kitchen, things in this picture, things that do not come in a box with instructions and with a long ingredient list. The other great strategy for lowering that insulin spike is resistance training and exercise. Exercise is, of course, very important when it comes to weight maintenance, metabolic health, and of course, we know exercise burns calories and the calorie balance is important. But when it comes to this hormone balance that we're talking about now, I showed you a little picture where insulin has to create that bridge for that sugar to get into cells. There's one type of cell where you don't need that channel open, and those are muscle cells. So if your muscles are active, if you're doing resistance exercise, you can soak up that sugar. So if you eat a meal that has carbs in it and you exercise within an hour afterwards, your muscles will gobble up that blood sugar and you won't get that insulin spike. So that can actually do a lot for your metabolic health. So classically, the advice was that you need to do cardio to lose weight because you don't burn as many calories by lifting weights by doing resistance training. But coming at this from a lens of metabolic health, of understanding hormone balance, we now know that building healthy muscle is one of the most important things you can do to protect your metabolic health. And while cardiovascular exercise, it can be really good for you, having a strong heart. It can also, there are people who have what's called chronic cardio fatigue, which is basically a lot of women were told 10, 15, even not that long ago, that we need to be running every day, 10 miles, that you need to be on the treadmill all the time, that cardio is king. Don't do resistance training because then you'll get bulky and that doesn't look good on women. So there was a movement towards a lot of cardio. And if you do too much cardio, your stress hormones will go up and you probably won't lose as much weight as you'd like to. Whereas resistance training and building healthy muscle, and this doesn't mean get big and bulky, which is actually kind of hard to do, but having healthy muscle and doing resistance training, moving against a weight with the big muscle groups in your body is really helpful for your metabolic health. And it's actually a great predictor of longevity as well as how you might get through a major illness. So there's been some studies recently with cancer patients looking at the #1 predictor of your outcome if you develop cancer, and this was at any age. And the #1 most important predictor was your muscle mass. So people with a higher muscle mass, people with more healthy muscle, overall, pretty much no matter what else was going on, lived through their cancer diagnosis and came out the other side healthier if they had more muscle. So resistance training is your friend. This means lifting weights, doing core training like Pilates, yoga. There are many ways to do resistance training, but building healthy muscle is really important. So I want to just pause there for 1 second and see if there's any questions. If anybody wants to put any questions in the chat, because we've already covered a lot. And before we move on to some of these other factors, I wanted to see if any of that was confusing, if anyone has specific questions about what we've talked about so far. All right, I'm going to take that as a no. Okay, so what else? So we've talked about calories, we've talked about hormone balance. So, and just going back to calories for a second, how do you keep your calories uh, from way outweighing how much you're moving? So whole foods are also a really good tool for that. You know, again, with the processed foods that are available, they're so highly palatable. They're engineered to create this response in your body that makes you want more. So even though an apple has some sugar in it, most people don't sit down and eat 10 apples. There's just a natural stop valve in your body where you're not going to do that. Whereas if you open a bag of Doritos, it might be hard not to eat the whole thing. So working towards eating more whole foods will regulate your calories to some extent. It is possible to eat too much whole foods and still have too many calories, but it is much easier to overeat processed food. So we're making sure our calories are not excessive. We're making sure that we're eating whole foods that have a lower glycemic index to balance our insulin. And the next thing we come to is inflammation. So inflammation is basically an overactive immune system. So we have an immune system that basically seeks out foreign substances in our bodies and tries to fight them off. If something looks like it doesn't belong, then our immune system will send a whole bunch of white blood cells over there to try to kill it, find it, and make it go away. Now, that is a good thing, but inflammation is what happens when the immune system becomes overactive without a good reason. So again, there are now chemicals in our food, chemicals in our environment, factors that we're exposed to that puts our immune system on alert when it doesn't need to be. Autoimmune conditions or conditions where our immune system attacks our own bodies have risen significantly over the past several decades, and we're just experiencing inflammation like we haven't before. And that is also a major factor in your metabolism and what your body is doing with the food that you eat. And when you are experiencing a lot of inflammation, your body is prepared for illness. Your body is prepared for scarcity. So we end up storing a lot more fat and we're not burning the food that we eat for energy. The metabolism basically shifts to protective mode. So inflammation in the body can look like a lot of different things. I think that intuitively, a lot of people know when they're inflamed. I see a lot of patients that say, I feel like there's a lot of inflammation in my body. And most of the time they're right. You know what inflammation feels like. It's that heat, it's the sluggishness, it's fatigue, it's joint pains, it's muscle aches, it's sometimes swelling. When there is a lot of inflammation, people just don't feel well. So the main reasons for inflammation, the biggest reason for inflammation is our diet, and sugars are a really big culprit for this. So again, this is a dose dependent sort of thing, and it depends if you're eating pure sugars, refined sugars, or sugars dressed up with fiber, which is fruit. That causes less inflammation if you dress up your sugars with fiber. But sugar is highly inflammatory. And again, we're seeing more sugar in our diets now than we ever have as a human species, which is causing us to experience a lot more inflammation. There's also a lot of chemicals now in our environment that are causing inflammation. There is a lot of research coming out now about microplastics and the fact that, when we're drinking out of water bottles, most of the time those have been transported at a higher temperature, and some of that plastic has probably melted and leached into our water. When we drink that, we are becoming more inflamed. The Environmental Working Group has identified a number of chemicals that are called obesogens or endocrine disruptors. So there are chemicals that basically, even if you're doing everything else right, if you're not overeating, if you're not eating too many processed foods or exercising, but your weight is stuck, you're not you're not losing weight, you're not feeling good, you're not metabolically healthy, your labs, your numbers don't look good. These obesogens, these chemicals can do that even if you're doing everything else right. So some of the ones that are particularly important are plastics, emulsifiers in prepared foods. There are some pesticides, which are really important as well, that leach into our foods, and then meats that are treated, animals that are treated with antibiotics, and animals that are treated with hormones will cause a lot of inflammation in our bodies. And there's some controversy around some of this, but red meat was was found to be highly associated with heart disease and all these other things. The thought was always that it's a saturated fat, but it may be more than that. It may be how those animals were treated and what was put in the animals' bodies that is now affecting our bodies as well. So inflammation is quite important when it comes to metabolic health. And gut health is something that we touched on before, but we have a large amount of tiny microbes that live in our guts. These are little bacteria. We actually have more bacteria in our colon, which is highlighted in orange, than we have cells in our entire body. So we have a ton of these little bugs living with us as part of our ecosystem. And recent research has showed how important those are to our metabolism. So a lot of us are now living with an unhealthy microbiome because of antibiotic overuse, because of some of the chemicals in our food. There are many factors that basically cause us to have a imbalanced or unbalanced microbiome, and this can be a really important factor when it comes to metabolic health, when it comes to weight. And again, I've worked with patients who are doing all the other things right, but there's this imbalance, and they're not losing weight, and they're not becoming healthier, and they're still dealing with low energy and all these other factors. So unfortunately, it's not as simple as taking a probiotic. Probiotics can be helpful in some cases, but we need to make sure that those gut microbiome, that those bugs have food of their own. So we really need fiber. We need fiber in our diets. We need about 20 grams of fiber per day, which is actually a pretty large amount of vegetables and fruit. But you can take probiotics, but if you don't have enough fiber for those bugs to eat, those colonies won't survive, and we'll see more inflammation. And again, the metabolism will switch over to fat storage rather than fat burning or using the food that we eat efficiently for fuel. And I'm not seeing things in the chat, so if people are asking any questions, if somebody would let me know.
We do have a couple questions if you want to answer them now. If not.
Yeah, definitely.
So Jason asked, he had gastric bypass and he wants to know if that changes how the glycemic levels respond.
So to some extent it does. And sorry, let me put this back into the way that if you've had gastric bypass, you just have less mileage for processing of food. So basically your GI tract breaks down food, your stomach kind of churns and breaks it down. And while you do that, in the best case scenario, glucose is slowly released. So that's what we want. We want a slow release of glucose and nutrients into your bloodstream so that you have a moderate or low release of insulin. If you've had gastric bypass, you have less mileage, so your stomach may be more sensitive. You probably know that you may be more sensitive to certain foods. You may not digest certain foods as well. So some people with gastric bypass are more sugar sensitive and just have to be a little bit more careful about what you're eating. Low glycemic index foods are still your friend, definitely, as long as you're not having adverse reactions to some of the foods that you're eating.
Then our other question was, outside of diet and exercise, what are your favorite pharmacologic therapies for improving metabolic health?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And it's um it's a big question right now, right? Because we are living in the age of Ozempic and Mounjaro and all these meds. Um and I think that, you know, we do have medications now that can balance some of our gut hormones that really improve insulin sensitivity, that decrease cravings for carbs, less healthy food, that decrease the food noise. So I think that there's a role. So I'm talking specifically about the injectable medications as a class of drugs. These are called GLP-1s. There is two compounds. They are manufactured under four different names. They are Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound. Little variations to each, but basically, we've really never had weight loss medications that have been we've had relatively safe weight loss medications, but never ones that actually improved our health overall. And these GLP-1s actually do lower your blood sugar. They improve your insulin sensitivity. They reduce inflammation. They do all these things. Now, they're not without risk, and there has to be a strategy. So I use these medications in my office with my patients, with certain patients. If you have been metabolically unhealthy for many years, there's all these factors that we've discussed, and they can cause some pretty major issues in your body. And for some people, going back to eating super healthy, it takes a long time to get back to where you want to be. So I think there is a role for these medications if they're used correctly. I only use them with patients in our weight loss program where we meet every week and we do dietary and lifestyle counseling. We see how you're doing. We use the lowest effective dose of the medication as a tool to sort of improve overall metabolic health, to decrease the cravings. And because while you're on these meds, cravings are much lower, it's much easier to make these lifestyle changes. We work really hard during that time period to make new habits, to make the lifestyle changes to heal your metabolism from the inside. Now, I've also worked with patients who have gotten these medications elsewhere, who have gone to a higher dose too quickly, not made any changes. And what happens then is you lose muscle, you get weaker overall, and you're completely dependent on these meds for forever. I'm not talking about diabetics now because they are very helpful in diabetics, but I think that if you use these medications, it has to be paired with some lifestyle changes. And we've had a lot of success doing things that way, where some people have decided to stay on a low dose long term, while others have gotten off of it. And it was just sort of the push that they needed to build really strong new habits to get to a healthy weight. And then they had the tools to maintain where they want to be. So it's a somewhat complicated landscape with these. I think that they can be really useful if used at the lowest effective dose with a lot of supervision, with in the right person, with a doctor who understands your medical history, who has done this many times, and who can help you heal your metabolism at the same time. I think one of the big things that we focus on in our programs, we don't want anybody losing muscle. So we're on you to eat protein, to exercise, to do all the things, to get the most out of these meds, to become metabolically healthy, not to just have a quick fix where if you miss a dose, everything just gets worse, and you can take these drugs and become less healthy, and your risk of disease is still very high. So hopefully that answers that question.
And we do have one more if you have time. If not, I can go over it after.
No, we can do it now.
Perfect. If you cannot tolerate the Wegovy side effects, are there other options? Also, is it true that it doesn't work for all?
Yes. So Wegovy is semaglutide. So there are two compounds. Wegovy and Ozempic are semaglutide. Mounjaro and Zepbound are tirzepatide. There are more side effects with the semaglutide compounds or Ozempic and Wegovy. So I've had some people who were unable to tolerate that and then moved to one of the tirzepatide compounds. So that is Mounjaro or Zepbound. We use a compounded version, so we just call it tirzepatide in the office. Some people have less side effects with that. So switching over to one of those medications sometimes will decrease the GI side effects. So those are common side effects. People experience nausea, sometimes vomiting, sometimes constipation, sometimes fatigue. So those are all possible side effects. So if you cannot tolerate that, then I think tirzepatide is the best option to try, and you can try that as Mounjaro or Zepbound or as a compound tirzepatide. And the reason why each one has two names is because one is marketed to diabetics and the other is marketed for weight loss, but they're exactly the same thing. They just have a different package.
And then one more question. What is your advice for menopausal women? Hormones are decreasing or non-existent and your weight just holds on tight.
Yeah, and that is probably one of the hardest phases in life for women in particular. And it's probably also the largest group that I work with. And because things really do change and your hormones shift. And as your estrogen drops, the body becomes less insulin sensitive. That means that even if you're doing all those things right, you will have higher circulating levels of insulin, which means you're storing more fat. So a lot of women that I work with say, all the things I've always done to stay lean, to stay healthy are just not working anymore. So I could spend another hour talking about this, but I think the big things are dialing in your biology optimization as much as you can. So that means eating adequate protein. So that's at least like 80 grams of protein a day for most women. Having a lot of fiber in your diet, again, about 20 grams of fiber in your diet every day, making sure you're eating those leafy green vegetables, all those micronutrients that you're getting from there. Prioritizing resistance training. So resistance training is a really powerful tool in menopause. And then managing sleep and stress as much as you can. So this segues very nicely into my next slide, which is about sleep. So both in perimenopause and menopause, and in everyone, if you're not sleeping, you won't lose weight. I'm sorry. Our society is very much about like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Sleep is not important. I can be so productive. I can stay up late. I can watch Netflix till 2 a.m. We have also worked with a lot of patients who are doing everything right, and nothing's moving, nothing's shifting. And then we talk about sleep and we work heavily on sleep. And we think a lot about, we can work on diet, we can work on exercise. Those are like easy steps people know how to take. But sleep is something that we should always be working on as well. There's some people who sleep well and it's fine, you don't need to work on it. But there's a lot of research about what we can do to get better sleep. And it's often a work in progress, developing a skill set and a routine around your nighttime activities that are conducive to good sleep is a huge tool for improving your metabolic health and your weight. So that means trying to get 7 or 8 hours of sleep most nights. Some women during perimenopause need more than that. On average now we are sleeping 2 hours less than our great grandparents, and that's made a major impact on our health, on our metabolic health. So your growth hormone is an important hormone that everyone has, even in adulthood, and it's secreted at night, and it is very important for burning fat and laying down muscle. And if we don't have those hours of sleep, the fat loss just won't happen. So it's important to sleep in a dark room, no screens an hour before you go to bed, no light in the room. We've seen studies showing that even if there's a small light coming in, that there's a much bigger glucose spike in the morning than in people who sleep without any light. You want to make sure you're avoiding that blue light. And then light exposure in the first hour that you're awake is also really important for your circadian rhythm. So trying to go outside when the weather is good enough and spending at least 10 minutes where your eyes can see real sunlight will adjust your circadian rhythm and just make it much easier to sleep at night. There's also supplements and other tools that you can use to help with sleep, and melatonin is one of them. Melatonin is also pretty anti-inflammatory and has some benefits. It should be taken at the same time each night, lowest effective dose, but it can be helpful to get that sleep pattern on track. So, and then, the other factor is stress. Stress is inevitable. And in some ways, our lives are a lot better than the lives of our great-great-grandparents who were, working in factories or in the coal mine and for very long periods of time under very hard conditions. But our life is very different in the sense that we are constantly connected now. There's so many different factors trying to grab our attention. We are available so much more than we were in the past to even marketing, to everything that comes in on all the notifications, everything that's coming in. And that is taxing, that causes physiologic stress. So, stress, sometimes there are factors in your life that you can't control. You have small children, you have a busy job, all that is, part of life. But there are things that we can do to counteract the effects of stress on our body. So, stress basically activates our sympathetic nervous system. So that is the part of our nervous system that releases a bunch of stress hormones. And there is another part of our nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system, and that is the rest and restore part of our nervous system. And even though some stress is inevitable, if you are doing something each day to purposely stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system or your vagus nerve to produce some of those feel good, some of those calm hormones, that'll go a long way for your health. So that's different for different people. Some people get a lot out of meditation, out of yoga, out of coloring, out of drawing, out of participating in some sort of hobby, out of just spending time laughing with friends, playing a game, reading a book, exercise, being social. So again, life can be a lot about what has to be done, what do you need to do next, but it's just as important for our health to make time to get that parasympathetic nervous system on board, because as a society, we're just stuck in that go state, and those hormones, those chemicals, will impact our metabolism, our metabolic health, and in the end, our weight as well. So the last thing I wanted to touch on quickly, and then I'll take any other questions, is mindset. So if this was easy, everyone would be in great shape, and we would look at that map from the first slide and everything would be green. And I think it's easy to feel like, there's something wrong with me, or I'm doing it wrong, or it's not working. And it can be really discouraging, and it can cause, a bunch of depression and anxiety and all these things. And I think we have to look at this from a growth mindset, where if something's not working in your life, then it may just be a strategy that you need to shift. Like, what are little changes that you can make? And if it's not working, if things are not going well, then it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or you're doing everything wrong. It just means that you might have to shift strategies. And sometimes it is very helpful to work with someone who has a more objective view of what's going on and can help you shift some of those strategies. And I tell a lot of my patients that we usually wake up with a certain amount of willpower for the day, and we use it on the various activities of our day. And we use up our willpower to go to work and be polite and do all these things. And often at the end of the day, it's just gone. And you want to make good food choices, but it's really hard because that bank is running really low. So setting up your life in a way that healthy choices are easier and less healthy choices are hard, is really important. And just acknowledging that this is hard. This is hard for everybody. We live in a world right now where this just isn't an easy thing. Um, and focusing more on, if you are employing good habits, you should be celebrating that. Focus on habits rather than outcome. So maybe you tried really hard and you didn't lose any weight this week, but did you exercise 3 times a week? You did? Fantastic. That's awesome. Give yourself credit for the things you can control. And if you keep doing these things, eventually your body will respond. You may have to try variations of different strategies, but congratulate yourself on sticking to good habits. If you failed, just pick yourself up and try again, because it is hard, but it can work if you're committed. So I will take any other questions that people might have right now, and then I'll tell you just a little bit about some programs that we have available at the office.
We have one question right now asking if your practice works with children.
No, unfortunately not. The youngest we can work with is probably about 14. Yeah. Okay. So we have an office in Vienna and in Berk where we do our weight loss program as well as a hormone optimization program, as well as just some regular internal medicine. We don't work directly with insurance in the office, but people can use FSA, HSA, and get reimbursed if their insurance covers out-of-network providers. And we also have a virtual metabolic repair program where we work with people online, and we don't use prescription medications for this program, but this is a really powerful 12-week program where you go through some modules and we meet every week. We work together to basically dial in your lifestyle to get the best metabolic health that you can. So what you get is a clear path forward to kind of get to your best health, more energy, clear skin, more confidence, and some reliable weight loss strategies if you're looking for those to get to a healthy weight and maintain a healthy weight. And again, we do these week by week modules for diet and movement and lifestyle, which you do on your own. And then weekly group coaching, as well as a weight loss supplement that I've compounded that basically helps improve your metabolic health. It has the most powerful ingredients, natural ingredients that are available right now to improve your insulin sensitivity, lower your blood sugar, and help your metabolism run more smoothly. So usually the program is $9.97, but right now, just for this end of year special, we're running it for $4.97 for the entire 12 weeks, which is about $41 a session. And the supplement is included with that. So, and then for anybody who wants to sign up today, we're doing just a little bonus where if people sign up in the next hour, you'll get a complimentary 30-minute one-on-one consultation with me to discuss your goals and strategies, and then an extra 30 days of our supplement after finishing the program. And there should be a link in the chat to purchase if you are interested at this point. So, and I can answer any other questions that people might have.
There's nothing in the chat, but if anyone has any other questions, let me know in the next couple minutes.
And I think we have Patrick. Are you on as well?
If I'm here.
Okay, Patrick is one of our health counselors at the office too, and he's helped us work with a lot of patients, and he can answer any questions that people might have about anything related to metabolic health or our practice or anything else.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mostly anything else.
Hi, I'm Laura, and I just wanted to can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the one that asked about the children. I actually have a 14-year-old, almost 15-year-old that I feel like needs some help. But also I was referred by Optimum Wellness, and I definitely have some inflammation. I think I'm just a walking inflammation. And I recently had some lab work done that I don't remember what exactly it is, but it basically suggests that, I may have autoimmune going on. So my question really, I don't want to get specific because I feel like it turns into an individual consultation. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But is that something that you would be able to cover? Like if your place would be beneficial for me if we had a consultation, is that how your practice works?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
If it would be a
We can
good,
do we can do, Patrick can send you a link in the chat and you could schedule just like a free phone call and we could talk about, exactly what you're looking for and the best way to go about that.
okay. All right, that would be great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Or even Pat could call you after this and
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I thought I had registered before, but then I didn't get a link, so I just registered real quick and joined right at 12 o'clock. So I'm not sure if my information is in there. If my phone number is, I wouldn't be available to chat today after this call because I have another immediate call in 5 minutes. But if you could send me an email or something, then I could certainly schedule something or go on your website.
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. This was very beneficial, so I need to get off now, but thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me, Dr. Dane. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Will you just send us your email or in the chat to me or to
Yeah.
Patrick? Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
No problem.
And the 12-week program is all virtual, correct?
Yes, that is all virtual, where we meet every week. And then there are online modules to go through to sort of optimize every area of your metabolic health that you would need. So that is open to anyone, whereas in our office, we're sort of limited to people who are in Virginia and DC.
Awesome. Are there any other questions?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the great questions. Thank you everyone for attending. And I will also just put our, gosh, I thought I had our office info somewhere around here, but we are the Gajer Practice, Gajer, and I will put it in the chat if anybody wants our website.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Gajer. Thanks everybody for joining.
All right.
I'm Dr. Jane, by the way. I haven't met a lot of you, but thanks for having me join the team.